So, Trent, it is Roberta Metsola then?
Yeah, that's right. It's a big win for Malta's Roberta Metsola after she secured broad support for a second term as the President of the European Parliament. Now, Metsola, who in 2022 took the post, is only the second President after Germany's Martin Schulz to win another term since the EU Parliament became directly elected back in 1979. In continuing the largely ceremonial role, Metsola will preside over the 720-member parliament, which negotiates and adopts EU legislative proposals and, crucially, approves the bloc's budget. Addressing the EU Assembly, Metsola said the Parliament should continue to be a strong supporter of Ukraine, the rule of law, and seek the power to propose EU legislation. A group of 63 European Parliament lawmakers has asked the EU to withdraw Hungary's voting rights in the bloc in response to Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban's recent visits to both Moscow and Beijing. Viktor Orban has met Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping on a self-styled peace mission to end the war in Ukraine. The lawmakers said Orban had deliberately implied that he was acting on behalf of the entire EU, despite not having the authority to do so. Though lawmakers have no formal ability to strip Hungary of its voting rights other than putting political pressure on Brussels, Hungary took over the rotating EU presidency this month. Meanwhile, in a letter to EU leaders, Viktor Orban himself said that US Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump is ready to act immediately as a peace broker in the Russia-Ukraine war if he is elected in November. Orban has long criticised European military support for Ukraine, in contrast to most allies who do support Kyiv's war efforts. Well, let's take you to Brussels now to speak to our correspondent Alex Carrier. Alex, let's start with Roberta Metsola. A big victory for her with a second term, but it will be a very different parliament this time.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Trent. An expected victory for Roberta Metsola. This was possibly the easiest hurdle to clear that the European Parliament is going to have to deal with this week, because more than a quarter of these MEPs are now either in far-right or hard-right groups, and that is very different from the Parliament that was returned in the last elections back in 2019. Now, the European Parliament is all about teamwork, all about coalitions, all about finding the group that you can work with, and those far-right and hard-right parties are not always in the same groups, and at the moment, the governing majority of the European Parliament remains in the hands of centre-left, centre-right and centrist parties. We've seen that with the Green Party supporting Roberta Metsola, trying to find a way to build a coalition. But nevertheless, you have Viktor Orban in Hungary, his Fidesz party aligned with Marine Le Pen's Rassemblement National in France, as well as Giorgia Meloni's Brothers of Italy, forming one far-right group. Then further to the right of them is another group of about 25 MEPs described as anti-woke, anti-feminist, anti-LGBT, anti-support for Ukraine, anti-Green Deal and environmental laws, and that will be a real thorn in the side of those centrist European lawmakers in the next couple of weeks, months, and certainly for the next 5 years. How is that going to manifest this week? Well, the big question now will be Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission. That building behind me is up for a vote to confirm her presidency on Thursday. Roberta Metsola sailed through. Not sure it'll be quite as easy for Ursula von der Leyen, Trent.
Alex, let's just talk about Hungary if we could, and these calls for it to be voted stripped of its voting rights. Just talk us through the significance of that. Will this letter from MEPs have much impact?
Well, it won't have the impact in so much of actually stripping Hungary from its voting rights. That is not up to MEPs, and at the moment there doesn't seem to be much appetite in the European Council, where all 27 member states come together to make decisions, or in the European Commission behind me to put forward measures to strip Hungary of its voting rights. At the moment, that is not something that is being seriously considered by the rest of the institutions, because it goes slightly against the mindset, the traditions of the European Union, trying to reach agreements through unanimity. To give you some context, back in January, 120 MEPs wrote a letter calling for Hungary to be stripped from its voting rights. This time it's only half that number, so that gives you a sense of the fact that these are important symbols, they're important messages, they're important expressions of the views of 63 elected members of the European Parliament. Whether or not they can have a direct impact is far less likely. What has happened, however, is the European Commission, as a very strong symbol, a strong rebuke of Hungary, and particularly Viktor Orban's trip to China and Moscow in the last couple of weeks, European Commission saying it will not send any top officials, no commissioners, no vice presidents, certainly not the president of the European Commission, to any of the meetings hosted by Hungary in the next 6 months of that rotating EU presidency. That is a strong signal, I should say, that says that the Commission is losing patience with Hungary. But for now, that country will keep its voting rights. Trent.
Alex Cadier reporting from Brussels.